You've seen the headlines, right? China is buying up American farmland. It paints a picture of a slow-motion invasion, a threat to our food supply. But here's the puzzle that doesn't quite add up. If the actual acreage is so small, why are almost half the states in the country rushing to pass laws to stop it? What is really going on here? Let's get past the headlines and find out.
This right here, this is the sound of the alarm bell. It's the narrative that frames this as a direct strategic threat to U.S. security. And you can't ignore it, because this is the story that's driving news cycles, fueling debates, and pushing brand new laws into existence. So whenever you hear an alarm that loud, the first thing you have to do is figure out if there's a real fire or if it's just a lot of smoke. That's our job today. We need to figure out if this story is really about the sheer quantity of land being bought up, or if it's about something else entirely. We're going to separate the fear from the facts. All right, here's how we're going to break this down. We'll start with that land grab claim. Then we'll get grounded in the actual numbers, the reality in acres. After that, we'll dig into the real concern, what's known as the proximity problem. We'll see how states are responding, and then we'll tie it all together. Okay, first things first. Before we can understand any of this, we have to start with the numbers. The political rhetoric is loud, but data speaks quietly. So let's tune out all that noise for a minute and just look at the raw figures. So here's the first big number that gets thrown around. According to the USDA, foreign entities have a stake in about 43.4 million acres of U.S. agricultural land. Now, that sounds absolutely massive, doesn't it? And on its own, it is. But a number that big is pretty much meaningless without some context. And here's that context. That 43.4 million acres, it represents just 3.4% of all the agricultural land in the United States. The other 96+% is held by Americans. So that foreign-owned slice of the pie is actually pretty small. Which brings up the next question. Who exactly are these foreign owners? Well, the answer might surprise you. The countries that own the most American farmland aren't adversaries. They're our closest allies. Look at this. Canada is number 1 by a country mile. After that, you've got the Netherlands, Italy, the UK, Germany. You'll probably notice there's a pretty prominent name missing from the top of that list. So where is China in all this? All the way down at number 18. Chinese-linked investors own about 384,000 acres. That works out to less than 1% of all foreign-held land. So right away, that whole narrative of a massive Chinese land grab, it just doesn't hold up to the data. And here's some perspective that really drives it home. Just one American citizen, Bill Gates, owns about 248,000 acres of farmland. So all of the Chinese-owned farmland in the entire country put together is just a bit more than what one single American owns. This is key to understanding the scale, which brings us right back to that central question. If the acreage is so tiny, what is all the fuss about? And this is where the entire story pivots, because it turns out the real concern, the one that's actually driving policy, isn't about our food supply or the total amount of land. It's about geography. It's not about how much land is being bought, it's about where it's being bought. So let's get right to it. If China isn't buying up enough land to threaten our food security, what is the threat? The answer comes down to 3 words. Location, location, location. Especially when that location is right next door to some of America's most sensitive military bases. Forget the spreadsheets for a second. This map tells the story that the acreage numbers can't. You can see here how Chinese-owned properties are located disturbingly close to critical military sites. All of a sudden, a few hundred acres isn't just a farm. It's a potential listening post with a clear view of a base that might house top-secret drone technology. It's a whole different ballgame. So what are intelligence officials actually worried about? Well, a few key things. First, the potential for sophisticated surveillance. Think signals intelligence and electronic eavesdropping. Second, being that close to critical infrastructure like the power grid is a major vulnerability. But the third one, this one's the real kicker. Under Chinese law, any Chinese company, public or private, is legally required to cooperate with state intelligence services if they're asked. There's no saying no. That is a world away from how corporations work in allied nations, and it's a huge red flag for security agencies. To see how this plays out in the real world, let's go to Grand Forks, North Dakota. This is the case study that really blew the lid off this whole issue and brought it to national attention. So here's the timeline. In 2021, a company called the Fufeng Group bought 300 acres to build a giant corn mill. The problem was its location.
just 12 miles down the road from Grand Forks Air Force Base, a major hub for our most sensitive drone and satellite technology. A huge local and national debate erupted, and finally, in 2023, the U.S. Air Force itself stepped in, and the city council voted to kill the project.
And this, right here, is the statement that changed everything. The Air Force didn't mince words. They officially called the project a significant threat to national security. Now, that's not a politician talking, that's the Pentagon. An assessment that clear and that direct gave local leaders all the justification they needed to halt the project, even with all the economic benefits that were promised.
And you have to understand, Grand Forks wasn't just a one-off incident. It's part of a broader pattern. In Wyoming, President Biden personally ordered a Chinese-backed crypto mine to be shut down because it was too close to a base that houses our nuclear missiles. And in Texas, a Chinese billionaire's purchase of over 130,000 acres for a wind farm near an Air Force base raised all sorts of alarms about grid security.
So this emerging pattern of strategically located purchases has triggered a pretty massive response. Seeing the federal government as maybe a little slow to act, states have started taking matters into their own hands, drawing their own lines in the sand.
And this map just shows you how widespread that reaction has been. We're talking about 24 states, that's nearly half the country, that now have laws restricting foreign ownership of land. Now, these laws vary a lot from state to state, but the trend is unmistakable. States are trying to close what they see as a major security loophole. At the same time, Congress is trying to play catch-up with a few bipartisan bills. You have things like the PASS Act, which would just outright ban land purchases by entities from nations like China, Russia, and Iran. Then there's the Soil Act, which is much more focused on that proximity problem. It would force a national security review for any land purchase near a military site. And others are just trying to fix the data and improve how we track these sales in the first place. Now, the main federal body for all of this is a group called CFIUS. Think of them as the government's national security gatekeepers for foreign investments. And in a really significant shift, the USDA was just recently added as a permanent member. That means, for the first time, there's actually agricultural expertise in the room when these high-stakes security reviews are happening. Okay, so after digging through the data, the security assessments, and all the new laws, where does that leave us? It's time to bring these two competing stories together and find a clear, balanced view. So here it is, the whole story in a nutshell. The fear is a massive land grab that threatens America's food supply. The facts show that's simply not happening. The acreage is tiny. But the reality is actually more nuanced and, in some ways, more serious. The facts show that a small number of very targeted purchases near highly sensitive military sites do pose a legitimate national security risk. The problem was never the scale of the purchases, it was their strategic location. In the end, this whole issue is a perfect lesson for our times. It is incredibly easy to get swept up in a big, scary headline. It's much harder, but so much more important, to dig into the details, to understand the nuance, and to make sure we're focused on solving the right problem. Because fear scales fast, but the facts, they take a little more time. It's always worth it to choose slower.